moving on then to Kenny. Kenny, following on from the earlier evidence session, had picked up on the role of the Republic in the terrorism campaign, harbouring people. Can you outline what they have done in terms of legacy and your dealings with them in the past?
Yeah, a difficult question. I will say it for 16 years as its director since 2008. And I don't believe that the Republic of Ireland state has truly moved into a position of understanding that it was a contributor to our troubles. It still exists in a space that it had observer status. And the difficulty with all of that is that the UK government will bring forward what it brought forward, which was to none of our likings. And the Irish state was able to sit back and then almost quality proof what the Brits did. And the difficulty, I suppose, with that approach is you can never truly come to a fair outcome in all of this unless you have two states bound into the process. Omagh is an example in point. 70 to 75% of the Omagh atrocity relates to the southern side of the border. The team that were involved in that particular terror attack and the lead up, the other atrocities that were carried or bombings that were carried around that time, the movements on that day, how they were handled, how they weren't handled, etc., etc. So we look, I suppose, at the extradition record of the Republic in the earlier years of the Troubles, and again, it was very, very poor. The security policies that pervaded, the questions that still need to be answered around the formation of the provisionals initially, the training, the financing, all of that. But I do have to say as well, they're not on their own in that. The UK state absolutely has to answer these same issues. And there's no hiding place for them. Both of those states have got to come forward with a new level of maturity. And in my mind, they need to put the good, the bad, and the ugly on the table. Because actually, the rumour mill and the supposition which runs rife across our society is actually probably more damaging than what the actual truth is. Because with that truth, there could be context also provided in some circumstances as to how things unraveled as they did. But the failure to do so means that there is a void, a chasm, and then other things will fill that chasm and void, understandably. So the Irish state, we have not had a particularly positive experience, and that is inclusive of victims and survivors in our borderlands, but also those cases that we represent in the Republic of Ireland, in our own nation state. They have not delivered for Dublin Monaghan families. And I know Alan and his work Just for the Forgotten with Dublin Monaghan. The Belturbet case is another example. There are a raft of changes needs to happen in the approach of the Irish state if we're ever going to get any real movement there. And that needs to come as well from a more aggressive UK state who, instead of merely taking the shots on the ropes, they need to also be prepared to ask the hard questions. I made a comment with the Taoiseach, the outgoing Taoiseach in the Southern government some time back, and I meant it like this, Timothy, that in the context of our experience on the border, we are stateless because we do not have the concern of the Irish state around delivering justice, truth, and accountability for those we support here. And neither do we have the care or concern of a disinterested UK state who will not do anything to rock the boat in terms of those relationships. That's not a good place to be.
Ian, representing a lot of families from a border county, can you give some context, Kenny, into how many cases that you've dealt with where the perpetrators have came either across the border or have used land on the other side of the border to carry out their attack?
These figures are obviously challengeable, but and we have looked in the rounds, and there are 550 to 570 murder stroke killings which have a cross-border element to them. And while those attacks were planned from the southern side of the border, carried out, and people then returned, they're around that, and that's a very significant percentage, obviously, of our troubles-related deaths, so upwards on 20%. So that absolutely justifies the need for a structure to have been established in the Irish side of the border. You can't merely look at it in the context of the deaths that were caused in the Republic of Ireland. We have to look at it in the context of the murders committed in Northern Ireland, from which there was a southern dimension.
And finally, um, from your group, do you believe that Stormont is delivering for innocent victims?
I think in some ways, in some practical ways, there have been developments over the past number of years, but where there's a real challenge and difficulty is it's around the continued playing out of the troubles in a different way. And what I mean by that is the glorification of violence, which is absolutely systemic within this society. And it's not the preserve of one section of our community, it happens across the board. And it is deeply, deeply damaging to the quality of life of victims and survivors. They have to watch this, and it's like rubbing salt into into an open gaping wound. There's no abilities for them to actually get to a place to have a quality of life again, because this is being mulled over so much. So there needs to be, finally, in our view, a recognition of the illegitimacy of violence across the board. There were always other options for people to take. There always were. We make good choices and we make bad choices in life, but we've got to stand by them and deal with them instead of trying to lie our way out of it.
Yep, no, thank you very much, Chair.
Emma?